Welcome. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni, the founder of Transformative Harmonics, a podcast that offers listeners a synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern science. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Transformative Harmonics. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni. Today, my guest is someone I've known since the 90s. We met when we were both opening the program called IPONO, which was an outpatient program for eating disorders. And we were kind of the ground crew that got the program off the ground. We've kept in touch, and she's had a lot of life experience, as I have, during that time. But at this time, she is here to talk about a subject that I had an inkling about when we first met, and everything has sort of culminated now. She's written a book, and she is out there sharing her message with the world. Nicole Kerr is an award-winning health expert, a speaker, and a best-selling author. She's appeared on CNN, PBS, CBS, ABC, and the Food Channel, a host of other shows to share her unique perspective on wellness, nutrition, and now spirituality. Today, Nicole is here to talk about a very personal subject, one connected to her life mission, which focuses on death and spirituality. But for the past 30 years, she's worked in many sectors of society, including our government, nonprofits, military, academia, healthcare, and institutions like hospitals and corporate settings. She is a registered dietitian and nutritionist, a neuro-emotional technique practitioner, an energy medicine student, and is certified in holistic stress treatment. As a disabled veteran of the U.S. Air Force, Nicole now maintains a part-time private practice, primarily using neuro-emotional technique, targeting often overlooked domains of emotional, energy, and spiritual well-being. I'd like to welcome Nicole to this episode. I hope that this gives you something to think about. It might be the type of episode that you might want to go back and listen to a second time, because we are going to walk into some uncharted territories and topics today. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side. Hello, guests. Welcome back. Today, I am here to talk about a topic that I've had on my mind for a while and been waiting for the right moment to present it. I think there's pieces in the awakening journey that all of us are engaging, taking a step and unpacking what's in our belief system. And the topic of death is certainly one of them. So I have someone, fortunately or unfortunately, that I've known and have a personal relationship with. So she's vetted by me and trusted. And she's an authority of her own right, from being an author to being someone involved in some pivotal changes in Hawaii in the food and health industry, to having her own experience and wisdom that comes from being involved in some of the infrastructure of our, the foundations of our government, working for the government. So she's a solid, seasoned soul who's been around. So to hear this story, I invite you to find the back of your chair, whether you're driving or sitting, to settle in, to take a few breaths, and to ask yourself, am I ready to listen to a podcast? Because we are going to talk about death. We are going to talk about some things that, might be challenging to hear, but also some beautiful, eye-opening, expansive pieces to this conversation. So just giving that consent, full body consent before we start. Slowing down. If you'd like to, on your exhale, you can sigh or hum or just give your vagus nerve a little support so that there's some space as Nicole and I walk you through a topic that you can have a lot of emotional reactions to and a lot of beliefs. So it can be a tender topic. So Nicole, I am so pleased to sit with you. After so much time has passed between us, we met in Hawaii so many years ago when I and you were both on the same clinical team with Anita Johnston. That's how I met you. You were the nutritionist and I was the lead therapist, and we were creating a program that didn't exist.
Right.
something from nothing. And then you went on from there to be very pivotal in Hawaii and a real gift to the community there. I left earlier, although, and you and Paul were two of the people that I knew I was going to miss when we decided to leave and went on my journey, but we stayed in touch after all these years. And now you're in North Carolina with me in the South. We're both like, what are we doing here in the South? This is crazy. But I hear from your story, that is part of your lineage, your understanding of how people move through the world and the culture. And so it's a perfect place in a way for you to be at this time.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm only 30 minutes from Camp Lejeune, Marine Corps base, which is where I was born. So I have come literally geographically full circle in my life here. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
I know.
Good to see you. And I have to say aloha, because that greeting to me, I lived it for 17 years and it means so much to me in my heart. For those of you who don't know what aloha is, it's not only hello and goodbye when you hear that, it's also compassion, it's kindness, and it's this mutual respect people have for one another. And we definitely have that not only in our career paths, but in our friendship. And we have kayaked together, canoed together, done so many amazing things. And it's so good to reconnect with you and be in the same state with you. And you're blazing again another new program, another new trail. So I commend you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, both of us, it seems like have, I don't know other way to say it, like a soul mission, right? And we're following that mission, right? And
Absolutely.
Mine's creating the podcast, the school, and yours is putting these pieces together of your life. I knew when we met each other that you had a story to tell. And so I've been on the edge of my seat since we met, waiting, what's the story? And I've read your book. I've given it to several people. It's helped so much, especially those that are aging and moving towards death, to bring some comfort and to bring some sense of hope to some of what we've been given and spoon-fed as, what happens when we transition from the physical body. And because of your unique experience, I just thought you would be the perfect person to talk about this topic with. So thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. My pleasure. Death is a very difficult topic to talk about. We want to just put it off to the side. I believe we are a death denial society. We just don't want to think it's going to happen to us, and we really don't keep it top of mind and realize, when we begin our day, we just don't know what's going to happen throughout the day. And we may not see the person that we saw yesterday. And, things happen. We're all of us are one phone call away from something traumatic or one accident away. I mean, we just don't ever know. And not that I want people to keep death at the top of their mind all the time, but be present with it. Remember as you go throughout your day, this may be the last time I talk to this person. So how do I want to lead this conversation? If you see someone, and, you hug them, that may be the last time you hug them. And I think that is a lot of regret that people have when someone does pass is, oh my God, the last time I saw them, I didn't hug them. I didn't tell them how I felt. I didn't show them whatever it was I wanted to show them, So take the time and be present with that now and say what you need to say to people, I mean, yes, still have your boundaries and all these other things, but, start being in the moment with it and realize that every day really is a gift. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. Yeah, it really is. I'm really hoping to change the narrative around death from one of kind of, most writers talk about it in a doom and gloom and negative kind of way. But my experience and the experience of millions of other people that have had near-death experiences is really the complete opposite. It's this one of love and light and this 100% brilliance of just of creation, of love, of acceptance, of knowing that you're eternal. And when you come at it from that point and look at the greater context of your life within the world and in, your soul's evolution, you find so much more peace about it, is what I have found. But one thing that I've had to address, and the mission that I was given from the other side directly by an angel, was told to not fear death. And when I came back and remembered that 19 years after my NDE, which was a car crash, I was like, angels, come on, that's a big topic.
It's a big topic.
To not fear death. I mean, there's so many religions, there's so many denominations. Every one of them has a different set of rules to get to heaven. I mean, this is a big assignment, And I'm sitting here going, how do you even tackle this, And the first thing I did was I decided I was going to write a book, and that book is titled You Are Deathless, and it took me 13 years, people, to write this book. Even though I worked at CDC, I wrote a lot of scientific type of articles. So I'm a good writer, but to write something about your own actual experience, about what happened to you, and do it in an authentic way, and not to keep things out of it because I didn't want to offend my parents, or I didn't want to to tell my truth, no strings attached. And it's not that I didn't care what they didn't think. Spirit basically said, you've got to tell your truth, even if it disagrees with other people in your family and causes fractures or whatever. You have to speak your truth of what you saw and what you experienced on the other side, because that now is my belief system. And it's caused me to be on this spiritually transformative journey, since my memory came back. So it's just been, it's been a journey of, any of you that are going through it or have been, we're still on it, right? In different pieces. But yeah, it's a big mission, and I'm going to do, and I have been doing my part to help bring maybe an alternative way for people to think about things and to look at things maybe through a different lens, and hopefully alleviate the fears. Because if you think about it, when you're in fear, you want to control and you want to fix things, right? That's a good sign that you're in a fear state. But a lot of our limiting belief cause us to perceive things that are not right. And that's why it's so important to get at your limiting belief systems and to really unpack them, because they activate your irrational fears. And those are what drive you a lot of times. And one fear that almost all of us have unconsciously is fearing death. And I can tell you from my experience, I did fear death before I died. And I was pronounced clinically dead at the site of the accident for at least 15 minutes before the first responders got there. The people that saw the crash came out and checked us. They couldn't get any signs of life on me. So they went in and got a blanket and covered me up. And it took, EMS a while to get to me. So that whole time I was under the blanket, I was gone. I was already on the other side, but the memory of the other side did not come back for another 19 years. Okay. So once the memory came back, that's when I really understood what I experienced and why I had felt so honestly depressed and alone and anxious for the last 19 years, because the only sign that I even had a near-death experience was these white lights. And that is Raymond Moody, who is probably like the grandfather of near-death experiences. He talks about one of the most shared consistent features of NDEs is this indescribable, brilliant white light that most of us experience. And to me, that was the love of God, because I felt no fear in it. I had no pain. I had no suffering. There was nothing negative at all about it. In fact, I felt like an astronaut, floating around in outer space. It was just awe and wonder. And that really is what I want us to change the narrative of death around. It is the awe and wonder of going back home from where we came from. And the timeline between the time you die and the time you're on the other side is instantaneously. It's like you are asleep and you wake up, from maybe an operation, they put you under, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, Miss Kerr, wake up, and I'm going, oh, wow, they already did it, and it's that instantaneous. You close your eyes one moment and then you're opening them the next and you're in a whole different dimension. And there's no pain at all attached to it. In fact, people ask me that all the time. Did you feel the pain? I said, no, because my soul left my body before the impact. And I can guarantee 99.9% of those people that have experienced instantaneous or traumatic type of deaths, like a car crash, like I had, when it is that impactful, your soul will leave before you actually like hit the ground. Your body physically experiences all the pain. And to this day, it's never come back. Now the ICU and the pain there, that's a different story. But
Yes.
when my soul was out of my body, there was, there's no pain because I could look down and see my body. I could see I wasn't in it. But as soon as my soul got back in the body, and reconnected and was conscious again, that's when the pain body showed back up,
Okay.
And the cool thing, I have to say this because it's really cool. The thing about when I was and my paramedic is the one that really is responsible for this. They had to do a sternal knuckle press to see if they could get any sign of life. And as he was doing it, my right pupil dilated. And you know that saying, our eye is the window to the soul?
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, my soul, I was already on the other side. It came back in through that right eye, and they were able to get a blood pressure of 60 over 0. Now, that's still in and out of death, right? Because you need to be at about 120 over 80. But I love that because I'd heard that saying a lot, and I just thought, why do we say something like that? But that was the portal, the entryway for the soul to come back in, and they got a heartbeat going again after that. So I just find that fascinating.
That is fascinating. Let me kind of summarize because there's so much to take in here.
Sorry.
It's okay. I
get going and I'm just like, oh, you got to pull me back. Rein me in.
Okay.
You're my friend. You can do that.
That's okay. So we've introduced the concept of the fear of death, and that being the premise of what you were given as your mission to come back and to write this book, which you've done. And then within that is also a lot of different belief systems that people have about the other side, about what happens. And the book kind of, walks us through those beliefs and some of yours as well that you unpacked in those years before the memory came back. So there's a lot about beliefs and how those beliefs influence us. And then there's the death experience itself. So I'm wondering if we take this and say, okay, in that part where you started to remember, you were then began to unpack those belief systems, which were the ones that became the most important. There's so many in the book, right? And how was that? There's this element of, I was taught by my soul.
Yeah.
These things. So if we can maybe kind of hold that framework and see which belief systems, pop up in the conversation.
I would say my belief system about God shaped my relationship with death. And I think that it does for everyone, because how you're raised in terms of whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, or what religion that you're raised in, that is going to shape your relationship with death, because they all talk about death because it's the only thing that is going to happen to every single one of us. Nobody is going to get out of this world with it. You have to die. So all of the religions talk about it, but they all have a different theology or a different belief system about what happens when you die, or what your experience is going to be when you die. And I think you can take from the majority of the collective NDE experiences is that God is not dualistic. God is not punishing on one hand, but loving on the other hand, and that's the way I was raised, and that there's set of rules. And if you don't follow them, then you're not good enough and you won't get into heaven. And all these teachings and these rules it get instilled in you at a very young age, and they really set up a system of fear in your body, an operating system of fear about being a good person and doing the right things and seeking forgiveness. And it really sets you up with this concept of being a bad person, which is really unfortunate because it's really, I call it spiritual trauma. And that's exactly what it is, in my opinion, is not that our spirit can be traumatized, because it can't. But when you believe that you have to have somebody or something external in order to get to God, that causes the fallout between your mind, body, soul alignment, because you're now giving your power over to something else to get you to go somewhere. You're seeking answers externally instead of internally. So when I went to the other side, I experienced God, or my understanding of God, in a whole new light. And it wasn't just white light. It was really a whole, wow, did they have this wrong? Or, oh my God, this is just not true. It's just not true. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me. It's taken me a while to digest that. And then how do I operate in this world with that different belief system? Because anybody who has an NDE, re-entry into the earth is traumatic. Okay.
Right.
Because you have these experiences and you have these understandings like we don't die. I mean, yes, we physically die, but our soul lives on. We are eternal. Okay. So I was never raised with that concept. I thought, oh, when you're gone, better do everything right this go round. So it was really a relief to realize that our consciousness, our soul lives on. That was like, wow. And to know, you're going to see your family, friends, your pets on the other side. I was taught that pets didn't have a soul. They weren't going to be on the other side. And that just crushed me. But that's not true. They definitely have souls. If you have pets, you understand this. In fact, my opinion is that pets come from the angelic realm. I mean, they're not angels per se, but they teach us about expanding our capacity for love. Okay. They are always there for us. And then sometimes I think that's another thing, is that when you experience an NDE, you experience this unconditional love, and then you come back to earth and there's so many conditions around love. And it's very hard to understand, well, why can't you just put me ahead of your belief system that I have to believe in Jesus in order for you to accept me the way you believe in Jesus? And if you don't, then I don't want the relationship. And so it's, when you have that experience, that it doesn't matter what you do or who you are. I mean, you're unconditionally loved, That's a very hard thing to come back and see it play out in real time again, when that's not who we really are.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest pieces of the experience, I mean, everything was big, everything, but it's just this fundamental knowingness in your bones, in your body, in your psyche, in your being, that we are eternal. And not many people have that wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. And that is the gift in the experience itself.
Yeah. It was freeing. It was really freeing. And it really helped tamp down the fear to know that I, Nicole, live on, and that I actually, and this blew my mind, I have had other life experiences, and that my soul builds on these life experiences and it evolves. And that's part of why we come down here, to evolve our soul and to grow and to expand our capacity for love and consciousness, and to learn these lessons, for lack of a better word, that we signed up for, and all of it is about raising our vibration and tuning into who we really are. And what I realized is we're all an eternal spark of God. God is not apart from us. God is within us. And I told my mother that, and she told me that I was being blasphemous. because they're very religious, Southern Baptist and Lutheran. And so she could not accept the concept of what I experienced because it did not match the religious beliefs that she'd been brought up with and that she had taught us. And she couldn't, and to this day, she can't understand why I have strayed from the church and the beliefs. And that is probably the other hardest thing about the beliefs about family is always going to be there, and family loves you no matter what. They say it, but then when you go down your own path in life and develop your own beliefs and develop the experiences that shape your beliefs, and they don't align with your family of origin, then all of a sudden the door closes and that leaves you feeling alone. And I think that's another thing from coming back from NDEs is there's a strain in those close relationships, and it can leave the experiencer feeling isolated, and like the world is hard to relate to, because these people who were supposed to be there no matter what are finally saying, no, that can't be true. That is not true. You're making this up. And I really had to deal with that because the time gap was 19 years before my memory came back. And people just said, well, you're making it up, and I had to really work with myself and understand what repressed memories were, to understand how that trauma had been stored in my body. And then when I felt safe and when I felt like I had the resources to help me deal with it, because it was so huge. I mean, you guys, it totally changed who I was. Everything in my life has changed as a result of that crash. I cannot handle, I'm sensitive to toxins, smoke, alcohol. I just energies with people, I don't like big crowds. I don't like, there's so much in me that fundamentally changed. And it's hard to just really accept that you're not you just can't go along with the crowd anymore. You just can't go along with what others are thinking. It's like, I have to be true to myself, and I have to speak out when you're sitting here telling me this, or I just walk away. And that's hard, even at my age, Paula, that it continues to be really difficult because it can be very lonely when you don't share the same belief systems everybody else in your neighborhood does, Yeah,
especially in the South.
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah. And so this ability to stand in your sovereignty and in your truth and in your embodied experience, regardless, is, I think, part of what many of us in different ways, in yourself in this way, we're cultivating that strength to do that. And with this topic, I mean, this is a really loaded topic. It's one people have a lot of opinions about.
Right.
So it's interesting, where you're positioned in the world with this message. But still, this experience opened you to things that not many people get to talk about. And it's sounding like in the book you are talking about a life review.
Yes.
Can you share more?
Well, actually, that is one of the lessons, during a life review, you're going to have that when you cross over. And basically, for those of you who may not understand, a life review is everything that we learn, how we learn it, what we say, what we do, what we think during our physical life, how it impacts ourselves, others, and the world, Mother Earth. You're going to feel what the other person felt, what Mother Earth felt, what the animals felt, the good and the bad, so it's important to start being mindful of your actions, your words, and what you're doing to yourself, to others, and the world. Because if you are hurting others, you are going in that life review to feel that hurt. And when you think about people that are very evil and that are hurting a lot of people, even somebody like Hitler, I believe that man is still going through his life review. It can take, time is not linear on the other side. Okay. There is no time. So it's hard to imagine this, but it can take a long time for somebody who has done horrendous and evil things to get through a life review, because they have to feel it for every person that they impact with their decisions, with their, even though they may not pull the trigger, they're the one that said to do it, all of this. So there is spiritual accountability, even if there may not be physical accountability the way we want justice to work here. And that's been a really freeing concept for me as well, because the guy who was driving the vehicle I was a passenger in was drunk. And his dad was a 3-star general, and he was able to get him off the charges of vehicular assault, driving under the influence, because of his position and his rank in the military. So I felt he didn't suffer any consequences as a result. And he's never apologized. He's an alcoholic, and I didn't feel like justice was done. So justice to me being done in the world has been a huge trigger when it's not done. But to understand the idea that there's a spiritual justice and I have to allow that to play out has helped me tamping down that trigger and let go of that. How you getting real frustrated with it all. And the other thing that's important to understand on the other side is you're never judged. And that was another freeing belief system. Another message that came through that I just really appreciate, because I was always taught you're going to be judged on the other side, and it was bad or good. And I've learned that bad and good are man-made terms that we have created here on earth in order to understand, put good and bad in a context. So we'll say something is good, and then it's got to have the polarity of bad. But on the other side, bad doesn't exist. It's all good. So you don't have that. So there's no judgment. So I want people to I want you to quit judging yourself. Okay. Because that is some of the worst judgment of ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves, and that we need to let go of that, because nobody is judging us except mainly ourselves. Yeah, others may judge you, but there's no judgment trial you're going to be going to, Please have compassion on yourself. Please forgive yourself. Please know you're doing the best you can at any moment. But when we're shaming ourselves and shoulding ourselves, I should have done this, I should have done that. I tell people, take should out of your vocabulary. That is the lowest vibration, most negative shaming message you could ever give yourself or others when you tell them they should have done this, or tell yourself that. So if you can start with not judging yourself, you're going to be able to expand that to not judge others. And that's very hard in the times that we're living in right now, with the different diversity and polarity and divisiveness that's going on. But to truly try to stay above that and understand that there's a bigger picture going on here that's needing to happen with the world. It needs to be reset, okay, on all levels. And that this is having to happen in order for it to be reset and for there to be respect and equality for all. So please, you're not going to be judged on the other side. So please quit doing it here to yourself. It'd be a good message.
That's a good take home. So you've got, you have these beautiful lessons laid out in the book, one by one, that sounds like, lessons your own soul went through, of like, let's take this lesson, Nicole, and let's teach you about legacy trauma. Let's teach you about how the trauma works and what spiritual bypassing is. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Well, that's a big topic these days, is gaslighting, right?
Yes.
And for people in the spiritual community, there is such a thing as spiritual bypassing. And I think most of us, I actually talk about it in my book. I think it was, let me see here. I can't remember what page it was on. So yes, spiritual bypassing is a term that I had never even heard of. But I think it's really important for those of us in the spiritual community to understand that term. And it happens when we use spirituality, at least in a mental understanding of it, to avoid painful feelings. And in my book, I say it is no matter how enlightened your beliefs are, you can still fall prey to this tendency. And it's like an example would be a woman recently had told me that she went to visit her family of origin. And I said, how did it go? And she said, you know what, Nicole, it was pretty rough. I lost my temper with my dad. I wasn't, I just walked out on him. I wasn't nice to my mother. And she said, my best friend said, well, you shouldn't react to him because he's just unconscious, So she's dismissing the way I handled the situation and is trying to tell me, oh, he's just unconscious and I should just allow that to happen. So that's called spiritual bypassing, and it's really subtle, but it happens a lot. So you just need to have your antennas up for that one.
Yes, beautiful. Well, and there's many ways that we deflect from experiencing what's happening in the body. And your book talks about that connection and the importance of feeling the emotions, which is a big part of your story, right?
Yeah. To feel is to heal. And I have to tell you, I think growing up in the South, or maybe just the US, we are an emotionally illiterate country. We have about 4 feelings: bad, mad, sad, and glad, And then I just, I really understood it when I got into this neuro-emotional technique. When I was having these stomach problems, I would just start belching like I had been drinking beer or something. Or it was like a monk seal. It's like this. And it started in my 50s and I didn't understand what in the world was going on. And I went to the gastroenterologist. I went to all these doctors and they go, no, your colon's fine, even though you had some issues, but no, there's nothing going on. So when you have something physically going on with you and there's no organic reason that the doctors can find as to why it should be going on, I'm telling you, you got to look at your emotions, and whether you are feeling them or not, or look at your lifestyle and nutrition and what you're doing to yourself there, or your environment particular. But I think a lot of it is emotional repression with people because we are so conditioned to not feel certain emotions. I know I grew up with a belief system of you never hurt your mother. Okay. To hurt her is like, you just, that's one of the rules. You just don't hurt your mother. You love her and that's it. Even though she may do things to you that are inappropriate or toxic or mean or whatever, you still have to love her. Another one is don't get angry, so you push all of these emotions down and you get cut off, and I was very much in my head my whole life. I used my intellect and my mind to get me through so much in life. And I was so disconnected. And that's what the eating disorder is about a lot of times as well, is the disconnection between the body and the mind. And I did develop an eating disorder as a result of not getting mental health help for the trauma of the car wreck, because my parents believed and told the doctor when they said Nicole needs psychotherapy for her trauma, that Jesus was our psychiatrist and psychologist. And it was really hard because I really believed that Jesus was my friend and Jesus was going to be there and Jesus would help me. And the eating disorder just got worse and worse and worse. And back then it was known as compulsive overeating. Today it's binge eating. And we got a lot of help for it. But back in the 80s, it was still kind of a new concept. And I couldn't understand it. And no matter what my willpower was, I couldn't just stop. And I talk a lot about this in the book because it plagued me. And I say plagued me for 20 years. And it wasn't until my memory came back and I understood what happened in the car and on the other side that I was able to let go of hating myself and feeling like I had done something so horrific, by getting in that car with a guy who'd been drinking, and made such a terrible mistake because my parents, and especially my father, told me, you disobeyed me. You got in a car with a guy who'd been drinking, I told you not to date cadets, even though you're going to school with 4,000 guys, I know smoking, no drinking, and I'm thinking, this is college. This is what we're supposed to do, is kind of like push our boundaries a little, but no, as a good girl, I wasn't supposed to even do that at 19 years old. So, my whole world and thinking that I was this good girl, why did a bad thing happen to a good girl? All that belief system just crumbled because here I was, laid up in a bed for 4 months, not even sure if I could walk again. My whole life changed with that car crash. But that, as I look back on it, is what needed to happen, Paula, for me to bust through all of the layers of conditioning that had been put upon me that I was suffocating under. And it was my time to really break through and transform and get this lesson about who God really is. There is no fear of dying. You just will go back to where you came from and you'll reset. And if you need to come again to learn another lesson, you'll come again. And if not, you'll stay over there. And that, on the other side, it's just beyond beautiful. There really is no words to absolutely describe everything over there. But I can tell you that spirits and angels, spirit guides and angels are real. They are on the other side to help us. And we need to ask for their help. That's the only thing they ask is they say, you have to ask for our help because we have something called free will. And they're not going to interfere with that free will unless we ask them. So it's so important to develop a relationship with your guide, your angels. We all have guardian angels, birth angels, whatever you want to call them, that are assigned to us when we come in. And they're not going to leave us until we leave for good. And I think the way I grew up, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know I could have a relationship with the spiritual side, the entities or the guides, the spiritual realm. Okay. And that when you have that, you realize you're never alone. And that's another message that I want people to understand is even though you may be physically alone, you're not alone because you have so many guides and angels that are working on your behalf and that are there for you. And they want to help you. And you can talk to your deceased loved ones. They are on the other side and will help you. And your pets are over there as well. I'm delighted to tell everybody because I didn't think, I was taught pets don't have a soul and it crushed me, but they do. Of course they do. They're just amazing. I really do. They show us how to expand our consciousness of love. They really do. They're little angels in disguise is how I look at them,
I love it. Wow. I love it. Well, let me backtrack just a bit to one thing you just said, which was, and I know how you frame it in the book and how you are sharing the story is that this tragic accident occurred. There was the rebuilding of you, who you were, but then the layering of trauma on top of that. And then there was the unraveling that began 19 years ago. Okay. And in that unraveling, these lessons came. And one of the lessons was about those on the other side. And that came from your own experience of talking to your mom. And can you tell us a little bit about that night? And it was in meditation, right?
The beach in Kauai.
Is that where it was? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's when I was talking. I was in, as a result of this crash, I've had ongoing chronic medical issues my entire adult life. And one of them is migraines and from a traumatic brain injury that I received. So I was once again going through a cycle of being in a lot of pain again, a lot of suffering. And I lived, Oahu on the windward side. And I went to walk on the beach one day and I was really questioning the angels, if they're there to help. Why am I still going through all of this? Why is it still so hard after all this time and everything I keep processing? It just seems like, this should be getting easier. It should be getting lighter. And I just finally, I knew I had guides. I knew I had angels, but I didn't really feel I had a connection to them. And I just called out. I said, I need some evidence. I need to know what is your name? I really want to know what your name is. And they typically don't name, angels, but I think they understand we're human and we need some kind of evidence to realize they're there. And I just heard this voice in my head, I'm Serafina, and I was like, what? Now that's not a name that's like said a lot, right? So when these kind of answers come to you, you really do need to stop and stand back and go, wait a minute, that really is that intuitive part of you, that whatever you are, clairaudient, clairvoyant, whatever clair part that you're sensing, that is the spirit realm communicating with you. And this is how you're going to start interpreting it. And I was floored. I really was like, I needed evidence. And you guys, they will give you evidence. I know people think I am crazy when I ask for a parking space, in a crowded lot. And I will ask the angels. And, to this day, they have not failed me once. A lot of times I'll forget, honestly. And then all of a sudden, when I can't find one, I'll go, oh, angels. And sure enough, if I will just be patient, here pulls out a card that didn't put on their lights or something. It never fails. They will answer, but you have to be open to how they answer. And it may not be in the way that you think it needs to happen. And that's why I also say I believe in prayer, because prayer is energy, is focused energy. Okay. And we're all energy. At the end of the day, that soul part of us, it's energy. It's the consciousness. Okay. And so that's what we are. That's why you have to protect your energy so much, because that's who we are at our essence. So I've been studying energy medicine, and that has really helped open up even another realm for me of how important it is to make sure that you're zipping yourself up, and that you're taking care of your aura, your field, your energy field range, and you're protecting that as you go into situations, especially if there's going to be negative people or toxic people or situations like that. So it has really helped given me additional fortitude around how to manage energy within myself and help direct it in terms of helping mankind as well, which I think, that forced collective energy has a vibration or a presence or a force behind it that can change things. So it really is. The learning is unending.
It is. The more layers we pull, the more that's there, right?
Yes.
And we just keep going, oh, there's that.
That's why you got to come back again, because there's so many of them, right?
Yeah.
Except I don't want to come back and have to repeat what I've done. That's what I've been there, done that. That's why I put that on my book as my credential. BCDT. Been there, done that. Don't need to get that lesson again.
I love it. I'm going to use that. So in a way that feels manageable, because there's so much of this important story that is all in the book, can we just give the listeners a small piece of the story of what happened to you so they know the context of which we're talking about? Just say somebody's had a near-death experience. And if this is part of the podcast that you would prefer to skip over, you can always pause, and because we have given you a little bit of a trigger warning. But if you could share just a bit, that, might help set the context for some of the other questions.
Yeah. So when I was 19 years old, I had started my sophomore year as a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy. I was in one of the first classes, actually, that admitted females. And I was there because my father wanted me to be there. He was former military, and I was such a people pleaser and parent pleaser. So I would do anything to please my dad and make him proud of me. So for me as a woman to be accepted into the prestigious, service academy was a huge, huge thing. He was so proud of me because he had been there and graduated in 1960. But I knew for me, the day I started boot camp, that was not for me. I got that clear, that my soul was not supposed to be learning how to fight and defend and kill people, even if it's for the freedom of American citizens. That's just not who I was. And so, but I could never quit, because failure in our house was not an option. So I stuck it out, even though I was in fear every day of, something horrible happening to me, or failing out, or knowing I was not on the right path. And so it started my sophomore year. We had a big event with our squadron. I was getting a ride back to the academy from this squadron event, which was at a park outside of Colorado Springs. And my roommate was supposed to take me back, and she wanted to go back with another guy, and he was drunk because they had provided alcohol at the event. And so she said, no, Nicole, I like this guy. I want to drive him back. So you go back with the other guy over there. There's only one other guy left. And so I said, but he's been drinking. And she said, oh, would you get over that? I know that's your father's rule, but go have some fun. And so I said, okay. So he had a Corvette convertible. I hardly knew the guy. He's like, let's go. Let's stop at a bar, get a couple beers before we are back. And I'm like, we have to be back by 7:35. I don't want to get in trouble because I knew we had these timelines. And he's like, we'll be fine. And we had 2 beers, which was the most alcohol I consumed in my life. And then before I remember the bartender saying, are you okay to drive? And he said, sure. So we go out, get in his car to go back to the academy. And then all of a sudden he wants to stop and park and make out. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. And so I said, let's go. And we got back in the car. And the next thing I remember was waking up in the ICU at Penrose Community Hospital the next day. And the paramedic that arrived on the scene, he told me later, he came to my hospital room 10 weeks later and told me what happened because I had no memory except for bright white light. And he said, Nicole, you were in a crash. You guys hit a boulder, moved the boulder, flipped the car, and landed on your top. You both were ejected. People in a house nearby heard it. They came by, called 911. They couldn't get any sign of life in you, so they got a blanket, covered you up, and just waited for us to arrive. When I got there, I could not get any sign of life. And this is the angel I called John Hartling, who was EMT, former Navy SEAL. And he said, no sign of life. No matter what I tried, I couldn't get it. And he said, I was so scared you just weren't going to make it. And you weren't making it. So he said, I did the only thing I knew left to do was a sternal knuckle press, which in the healthcare field is designed to elicit pain in the body. And when he did that, you guys, the most incredible thing happened. And he says it. He owns it. Your right eye dilated. I knew you were still alive, Nicole. And so at that moment, when that happened, your soul came back in through that right eye. Remember that saying, our eyes are the window to our soul. That's exactly what happened. My soul came in through there. All of a sudden, you got a blood pressure of 60/0. Now, that's still in and out of death. They had to do CPR all the way to the nearest community hospital. Okay. And basically, the extent of my injuries were horrific. You can read about them in the book. I'm not going to go about them in detail here. Enough to keep me 6 major operations, 4 months in a hospital. You know, I got addicted to Valium and Demerol and morphine for being on it for so long. I mean, it was one thing after another. I had to have a colostomy, didn't even know what that was. You know, it was just massive trauma and massive roller coaster of, you know, in and out of death. I had 2 more near-death experiences in the hospital, but clearly Spirit Creator wants me here. You know, it's like when you're meant to stay, they're going to keep you here. So yeah, that was, that's the nuts and bolts of the crash. You know, they didn't think I'd walk again. They thought I'd have so many more limiting injuries. And then 19 years later, when I'm working at CDC, is when my memory of the crash came back, to go into Starbucks like any other day and get my order. And all of a sudden, I started remembering exactly how I sat in the Corvette. I understand now why I cut off my left foot, you know, because I had one foot on the dashboard, the other one was over it, kind of laying back in the convertible. And it just unfolded like a movie. It really did. It was that detailed. And I could just see myself going through it in slow motion. And then I went to my body healer instead of to work. I was freaked out. I didn't know what was going on. He said, Nicole, these are repressed memories. And we got to a certain point where I was up in the air looking down at my body, knowing I was dead. And that's when an angel came and took me over to the other side. And it's really weird, you guys, because they don't speak English over there. Okay. You get everything through telepathy and vibration. And they're like Casper the Friendly Ghost. You know, they have an outline, but, you know, we're all translucent. We don't have these bodies. It's so hard to think of ourselves like that, but we are. And, you know, like our eyes, we can see about 45 degrees out. Well, on the other side with your eyes, you can see 360, the front and the back, the future, the behind, all at one time. I mean, it's wild. The colors, you know, I came back, I wear bright colors. My house is colorful, you know. I cannot wear black and beige and brown, you know. And I always wondered, why do I wear such colorful colors? It's because on the other side, you guys, there are more colors than are in the Crayola color box. I mean, I don't remember them now, but there are more colors than we can even imagine. So it's things like this that you're just going, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable, you know? But the message that they told me was, you're going to go back and you're going to tell people not to fear death. And I was just like, that is a huge message. I mean, huge, because we do not like to talk about death here. So, I was like, oh boy, what's that going to look like? How am I supposed to do this? And I really knew in my soul, I had to write a book, to get it out. And it took me 13 years to write my book. And I will tell you, that was therapeutic for me at one level, to tell my story and to not edit it out and to be authentic, even if it pissed off some people, to be honest with you. It's not their version of Christianity or whatever. My experience of love, basically, that's the biggest message, is we're all love and we're all oneness, and that's like, whew, when you boil it down to that, that's pretty, all the things that the religion was built on. If you just boil it down to that, you don't have to have all that other stuff, It's kind of funny. My mother asked me about 10 years ago, when I lived in Hawaii, she goes, which church do you go to? I said, Church of the Beach. She goes, I've never heard of that one. I said, Mom, it's all over town. You should really come out here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I find with the presence of creators, sorts, whatever you want to call it, in nature. That's where I feel it. That's where I'm immersed in it. And that's where I feel the love, and from Mother Earth, from all sentient beings. And that's why in this human form, we need to be mindful and to awaken to ourselves the truth, and to start treating Mother Earth, one another, and all sentient beings with respect and equality, because it matters. It's important. And that's what we're resetting our Earth to for the next, 20 something years it's going to be.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to take a moment to just recognize the potency of your story, the actual event, give people a chance to take a breath a little bit, and the ways in which these people come into our lives we don't always think about, right? Why that cadet? Why? And I often talk about, when we wake up in the morning, each day can be a day where we say, well, I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder what magic, right, is going to happen, that every little thing, and even within a tragedy and a tragic event, there's still this magic happening in terms of who we're connected to and what's unfolding between us. And if we can live into that, it changes. It makes life not as flat. It brings us into a sense that there's a symphony happening every day amongst us. Some of those symphonies have tragedy in them. They have tragic. And within that tragedy is still something beautiful unfolding. And your story is such a testament of that. And I love it. And I love how in the book you show the pictures of the people coming back or meeting you later. Some of them you met later again.
That was a huge piece for me. I have a chapter called Calling All Angels. You guys, angels exist. Okay. So let's get them on our side in terms of be friends with them, ask for what you want, please. But they not only come in the angelic side, they come in, they show up as people, as well. And I talk about how that EMT, John Hartling, he was an angel. He is a former Navy SEAL, you guys. He would not take no for an answer, even though those bystanders said she's gone, just call the coroner. And he's like, no, I'm going to work her myself. Nobody tells me how to do my job. And, I needed someone that was like, no. And then I go to, when I'm at the hospital, my lead surgeon that was on call that night, the first female surgeon in Colorado Springs, the first female medical student at Jefferson College in Philadelphia. She's a maverick for women in terms of medicine. She is the lead team thoracic surgeon on my, she gets the call that night. And so I'm looking at her going, oh my God, this woman is an expert in medicine. And even she said, Nicole, I believe in NDEs now because we lost you 3 times there. And it wasn't my skill set that brought you back, right on the operating room table, and something greater than this universe got your heart going again. Cause we just all said time of death is this and called in the nurses. It's just like, no, this isn't our skill sets that are doing this. And then, so she's one of my angels. And then, of course, the nurse, Sandy, she's OCD. I was so fortunate. She was with me in the ICU and they let her transfer to pediatrics. This is where they later transferred me 2 months later. Okay. She continued my care through the whole way. And I'm still in touch with all of them. But you guys, she's OCD. So she would take my tray. I had severed my wrist. So she would take the milk carton and open it up and put the straw in it and put it to she was so detail oriented. And my care needed that because I actually needed 2 nurses on me at the beginning. I was so high maintenance, with all of my injuries and bandages and just stuff going on. So she never let her guard down in terms of being mindful that I just had this hospital gown on and trying to keep me covered and to preserve a little bit of modesty. I love that woman to pieces, and I have stayed in touch with all 3 of them. I went back 25 years after the crash and I took them all out to dinner separately and they couldn't believe how tall I was. I'm 5'11". And I was in the bed the whole time they saw me, okay, because I'd broken my pelvis. So when I stood up, they were absolutely shocked I was so tall, and, they all told me separately, I'm the only person they've ever treated, and they're all in different parts of healthcare, that has come back to thank them ever. They go, we don't do this for a thank you, but you guys, gratitude is huge in our lives, and not for just the big stuff. Be grateful that you can breathe, be grateful that your heart is unconsciously going. You're not having to go work hard, all these things that you take for granted that are just you're going to wake up and they're all going to be working, or all these people are going to be around you again tomorrow. I think that was one of the biggest lessons is don't take things for granted because your life can change in an instant. And Lord knows I didn't think that Sunday night that I wouldn't be back at the academy, scared to death to go do my double engineering class that I thought I was going to fail. But I never did the English paper. I never did it. I never went back. They took all my stuff out and shipped it away, and so it's important to prepare yourself for death. And I know that is something we don't want to think about, but you have to do the will, all of these pieces. If not, you see what somebody dying unexpectedly and the fallout and the fracturing that can happen within families if people don't put their wishes down in paper so that everybody is on the same page. It can destroy family. It does destroy families.
Yeah. So
it's so important what you want, is, do you want to be cremated? I know that's not easy to talk about, but it's important. These are my wishes. I just recently in the last month was almost into crashes again, and my PTS has flared up and I'm having to deal with that. But it just reminded me again of how quickly your life can change and making sure you have got your things in order about what you want. If for some reason, hopefully it won't happen, something goes sooner than later. Let's just put it that way.
Well, it brings me back to this idea that because we fear death, we don't talk about it. And we don't talk about some of those things that are important, right? Yeah. So it all kind of builds on each other. And so it feels like there's a shift fundamentally in our collective shift to bring back, to think about the passages of life, both how we birth and how we leave differently. And as the collective shifts, those are 2 areas of our life that are probably going to get a lot of attention right now from those who are able to speak of a new paradigm, a new way of holding birth and death. So I'm so pleased we're having this conversation to open the conversation up more broadly.
Absolutely.
That are listening.
And especially with children as well. It has to be age appropriate, but it's really important that they understand the concept of death. And when you have one parent that passes and you have little kids, the normal thing to do is for the other parent they're going to go, well, is something going to happen to you, mommy or daddy, whichever parent is left? And that parent typically takes on, oh, nothing's going to happen to me. It's going to be fine, and the truth of that is you don't know that it's going to be fine. You don't know that nothing's going to happen to you. And maybe to open it up to, well, none of us are guaranteed anything, but mommy does everything she can to keep herself well. There's no reason to think that. But if something should happen to mommy, you're going to go live with Uncle James and Aunt Nicole, and you're going to still be, you may be in a different school district, but it's not your responsibility to worry about the money that's going to be, and to take some of this pressure and anxiety off of the child to think that they have to hold that now, fear that something's going to happen to the other parent, So yes. It's learning to have those kind of conversations instead of just these pat answers of, no, I'm going to be fine. And if that doesn't happen, then they're really left wondering, right? So yes. It's important to change this whole narrative around death from one of doom and gloom and negativity. And yes, I understand the human part of emotions and the grief and all of that you feel with it. But to turn that into one that I'm trying to get the message out of light and love, and you are eternal, and you can have a conversation with the deceased loved one on the other side. They're not gone.
You are helping us to rewrite our narrative around how we think about death as a passage, a rite of passage, and to bridge our understanding of it. And what for you feels like just the big take-home messages for people if they were to get anything from the book or from this conversation?
I think the biggest message is we're all love. And on the other side, when we pass, we're all love and oneness. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. And that there is nothing to fear, that please pull apart your fear and look at what are you fearing regarding the death of leaving your loved ones or whatever it is, to try to understand where that is coming from, because unconsciously that is really running your energy system at some level. That level of fear is, and to free yourself from that, because it truly is a gift to be on this planet and to make the most of your time here. And if you're in fear, you're not going to truly live.
So true. So true. It's going to keep us from fully experiencing life, all the emotions, all the beauty, all the pain, but that's part of life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No one's getting out of here without it. So
yeah.
It's the only way we seem to learn, right, Paula?
Yes.
Pain and suffering.
Pain and suffering. Well, I love that we've had this conversation. I think it's one that's well overdue. And the time right now, if we think about how many people are talking about this topic, I love that you're bringing this in a way that speaks to all of those who have come from organized religion, and they're unpacking like what was I taught, and how does that serve me now or not serve me? And then there's this invitation. What I love as well, because I teach this a lot, is this invitation around self-compassion, around self-love, around softening how we treat ourselves. And that it's not just about how we treat others. There's so much of our healing right now is about how we treat ourselves as a result of the things that we've done and the choices that we've made. So I thank you for reminding us about that as well.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure, Paula.
Thank you, Nicole. And we'll keep in touch, and maybe I'll come up and kayak with you sometime.
You come down the Neuse River.
Great. Thanks again. Thank you for being a part of the Transformative Harmonics Podcast. If this discussion resonated with you, please subscribe, share the episode, or write a review. This helps to support the expanding community around embodiment, sound, and conscious living. You can visit Transformative Harmonics at paulascatoloni.com to find out more about my work, forthcoming classes, and the Transformative Harmonics Academy. You can also reach out and connect with me on Instagram. My handle is at Paula Scatoloni. I write regularly on Substack at Signature Frequency Living. Until next time, take good care and thank you for being part of the journey.